Welcome back. Clean sweep. Former President Donald Trump and Republicans won a commanding victory in the 2024 election last week, taking the White House, the U.S. Senate, and the U.S. House of Representatives, and also came out victorious in the popular vote. The results have Republicans excited about a second Trump term and have left Democrats shell-shocked from the results after Vice President Kamala Harris' sweeping loss. We'll talk about the results, who's to blame, where things went wrong, and where things go from here. We'll talk about those stories and more today, Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. From Ishan Media, this is the Ishan S. Show, a podcast about the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics, with me, your host, Ishan. Welcome back. So, we just had quite the something, didn't we? I think it's more like world-altering news. I'm trying to think. Oh, right, we had an election. So, for my friends who've been living under a rock for over a week, there was an election in this country. It was a presidential election. Vice President Kamala Harris went up against former President Donald Trump. I'm not going to dive into the storytelling of the night or, all of that. I'll get to that in a second. But for right now, I'm going to cut to the chase. Donald Trump won the election. He is now going to be the 47th president of the United States. And, for basically the entirety of this show, I have referred to Donald Trump as former President Trump. But from now through Inauguration Day, I'm going to call him President-elect Trump, and starting January 20th, 2025, he will be President Trump again. The night ended, when we're talking about the election results, the night ended pretty quickly. And to be so honest with you, going in, I remember I made that Election Eve episode, and I honestly felt like we were going to have days. I thought we might not find out the results until the weekend. I thought it was going to be the closest race in recent memory. Going into this race, there were 7 established swing states: North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Within, I would say, roughly 3 hours, the first 3 hours of the night, any hopes for the Harris campaign of recreating President Biden's victories in Arizona and Georgia were gone. And with that, any hopes in North Carolina also pretty much evaporated. The point is, the rule is, you're not winning North Carolina if you can't win in Arizona and Georgia. And so once Democrats really gave up hope on Arizona and Georgia, it was pretty much game over for the Sun Belt strategy. State after state, we were beginning to notice this pattern of things coming down to our notorious blue wall: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the Holy Trinity. Now, Trump really only needed to win in Pennsylvania. Harris needed all 3. What we were seeing was basically, what we were all witnessing was a repeat of the 2016 election. But in general, what makes us different from 2016 was, we had President Biden, who had won a lot of constituencies that Hillary Clinton had lost. Going into this, Harris was doing worse compared to Biden among a few groups, but also, even compared to Hillary Clinton, she was doing pretty poorly, which might come as a shocker because coming out of 2016, there was this understanding that Democrats had hit their lowest point. They couldn't do worse than that after they lost with Hillary Clinton. Yet, somehow, there was a greater deficiency when it came to the Harris campaign and trying to win a few constituencies. And I think that really shocked a lot of people in the system. And I think around 1 or 2 a.m. Central Time, things began to look very, very clear. The writing was on the wall, and once Pennsylvania was called, it was game over for Harris. And so that was election night in a nutshell. I guess I watched everything the whole night for you guys so that I could summarize it all in one paragraph on my script. But beyond just the presidential election, losing the presidency, Democrats also lost control of the U.S. Senate. They went from 51 seats out of 100 to just 47 now. As of the writing of this script, we're still not sure about the seat in Pennsylvania. That's actually very close right now. Pennsylvania living up to its true name, I guess. In the U.S. House of Representatives, Republicans have managed to clinch on and grow their majority. I know a few networks have actually called the House for Republicans. Some, like CNN, have not done that yet. I will defer to their projections for the House, but it's a challenge for Democrats to really even win back the House right now. And beyond just controlling the House, Republicans seem like they are about to grow their majority to somewhere between 220 and 222 seats, something like that. Once we get the final results, mainly from the California races, we will have a better idea of what that majority looks like, but they are expected to grow their majority. And, given that they had a 1-seat majority in the last Congress, it's not... they'd be happy with whatever growth they get. But here's the clicker. Trump actually won the popular vote against Harris, 75.4 million votes to Harris's 72.3 million. That's the first time since George W. Bush that a Republican has won the popular vote, and it is the second time in the last 9 elections. Take a moment to process that, because Democrats have not won in the last all 9 elections. They have lost about half and half. So Republicans have been done really bad with the popular vote. Yet this time, Trump was managed to pull off a 3 million margin over Harris, and it was a 75 to 72 million thing. Like, turnout wasn't terrible. It was a pretty big, sweeping popular vote victory, especially on account of the fact that Republicans are just not... they aren't set up to do that well in a popular vote, just given how it is. It's why they have this huge advantage in the Electoral College. But when looking at all of the results that we got from Tuesday night last week, it's safe to say President-elect Trump had a nice night. He is going into this next term, with the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. Some are calling it a mandate from the American people, and honestly it is. Americans in overwhelming numbers came out in support of the former president and his party, and they sent a message of dissatisfaction to the Biden administration. I will talk about Harris and Democrats and Biden, all of that in a second, because that is definitely something super interesting for everyone to look at, and I think it's something we all should be looking at. But before we talk about the Democrats, I want to play some comments from Trump's election night victory speech, and just capture, he's very excited, and I thought let's share some of the excitement that he had from that night. Take a listen to Donald Trump and his victory speech, a few highlights.
Now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
But obviously, Donald Trump was not the only man on the ballot who won that evening. There was another special someone on that stage, and his name is J.D. Vance, which, let's cut him some credit right now. For all of his complexity, this is a dude who went from zero political acumen 2 years ago to winning a Senate seat to now being one heartbeat away from the American presidency. Talk about sudden rises of power. I will give J.D. Vance the credit where it's due. He may not be very qualified for this role of vice president. I don't know. But he managed to pull off something that most politicians can only dream of doing. And he might even actually be, if I'm not wrong, you can correct me, but he may be one of the youngest vice presidents in U.S. history, maybe the youngest, at just 40 years old. So, there's that. I mean, good for him, I guess. But here's a little bit of J.D. Vance's very brief remarks from election night.
I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America. And after the greatest political comeback in American history, we're going to lead the greatest economic comeback in American history under Donald Trump's leadership.
So that is the Trump-Vance ticket, America, your next president and vice president of the United States. So what exactly does this new presidency look like? Well, if we jump straight into policy, this administration wants to initiate their, flagship policy, the mass deportations of millions of people in this country. They're focusing on millions of illegal immigrants who came into the country during the Biden administration. That's the ones they're pinning on. Trump. The Trump team is very adamant about deporting all of those people, but there's a little bit of confusion, I guess, on their part about exactly what that number of people is that they want to send back. There are figures that range from 11 million to 20 million. I would suggest that maybe they try to get that number straight before anything else. I don't know, always helps to have a little good, clear idea. But then a second Trump term is going to see the introduction of a lot of tariffs. Trump says it's to punish China and stick it into the face, but also to create more production here in America. Now, I will note, I'm one of the people that's chronically on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and I've read a lot of stories of people just learning what tariffs are, and maybe not being completely excited by the notion of tariffs. I don't know. If you know what a tariff is and you voted for Donald Trump, then you made a very conscious decision. I'm just saying that there are some people out there that did not make a very conscious decision. But with the tariff, what is a tariff? It's basically you are putting a tax on people that are foreign companies that are trying to sell products in America. It's called protectionist policy. By definition, it's to protect American industry by keeping out foreign companies. And while the idea is very noble in thought, the issue is the American consumer really does operate on a lot of foreign products. The microphone I'm recording this on, the cell phone you're using to text someone right now, the clothes you're wearing, it's all imported. Like, we do not produce a lot. And so when we place these types of tariffs or these taxes on foreign imported goods, inevitably it drives up costs. Companies start to make cuts or they start to raise prices. When Donald Trump was running, his hope, or when he was asked about the tariffs and his policy was scrutinized, his hope was, in his words, to eliminate inflation using tariffs in a second term. Between deporting millions of people that do a lot of cheap work and artificially driving up the costs for consumers via tariffs, I'm not sure what inflation he thinks he's going to eliminate like that. But of course, we have a good 4 years on this show to scrutinize the Trump administration's trade and immigration policies, so don't worry about that. We'll be on top of it. But beyond that, another person that I feel is worth noting is a certain gentleman by the name of Elon Musk. He was very quick to endorse President-elect Trump after the first attempt on his life back in July. I can't remember if I covered the Musk endorsement, but I'm pretty sure, but he did very quickly, actually, after Trump was shot, he actually endorsed him. Since then, Musk has seen his influence grow exponentially. I mean, overall, the sorts of things this guy says on a lot of ranges of topics, it's expanded quite a bit since July. Like, he suddenly is an expert on all sorts of policies after endorsing Trump. Noted. This guy's the richest man on earth, and he was being featured in Trump family photos on election night. Trump's granddaughter, Kai Trump, she posted a vlog of election night on YouTube where she showed footage of election night, including when they took that photograph where, I'll point out, Melania Trump wasn't even in the picture, but Elon Musk made it in. Elon awkwardly standing there in the middle of this family celebration. We've all been there. But then Trump calls him into the photo, and he's like, no, Elon, you come in the photo too. So now we have a photo of the whole Trump family and Elon Musk. Very interesting. Billionaire has the ear of the next president. That is what it is. Anyway, that influence has ranged it's not going to just be at the campaign trail. Now it is coming into the transition process. Musk has reportedly been in the room with Trump for key personnel decisions. He was appointed to the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. We're going to talk all about that in just a moment. He also sat in on a call between Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. So, Musk is an influential figure in this next Trump administration. How long that's going to last, because let's be honest, these are two men with incredibly large egos, but we'll see how long they last. But here is Trump talking about Elon Musk in his victory speech. Take a listen.
Star is born, Elon. He's a character, he's a special guy, he's a super genius. We have to protect our geniuses. We don't have that many of them.
I guess we don't have a lot of geniuses left in this country. I'll leave you guys to be the judge of that. But anyway, that is the Trump ticket. Pretty interesting stuff. Now, before I move on, I just want to make a personal, somewhat editorial, but not really, comment. And that pertains to this show. From the very beginning, the Yishana show has covered the Biden administration, so there is going to be a bit of an adjustment going in. I mean, look, as somebody that covers these people, I've gotten used to covering familiar faces, and I've gotten used to certain ways. But now we have a new president coming into office, and so I just want to pledge to you that I will continue to do the work I've been doing on this show to cover the facts, offer my analysis, and I will say, it's going to be a shift. But while this show first started during the Biden administration, the idea for this show came during the Trump presidency. So a lot of the skills, the style, the commentary, all of that stuff that I've learned as a journalist, a pundit, believe it or not, I learned during the Trump presidency. So I think going into this next administration, I feel like I'm well suited to cover President-elect Trump on this show going into the next term. But, that's my little 2 cents, not a big deal. Of course, if you have comments about my commentary or the show in general, feel free to let me know on the ishaneshow.com. If you go to the bottom of the website, there is a form that you can fill out for for feedback. But that was the Republican side of things from election night. Now let's turn the page a little to the Democrats. Going into Tuesday, from my own conversation with many Democrats, including some on the ballot, things were looking positive and hopeful. A lot of predictions had Harris narrowly winning with 270 to 276 electoral votes. And throughout the night, when I was watching it, I was expecting maybe a comeback. I don't know. Because I was going off of all these predictions, and I was going off of the Ann Seltzer poll that I talked about last week. There was a lot of stuff going into my calculus that maybe things could be close. But, and I think there was also just another thing that went into this. They had a solid field operation. Thousands of volunteers, thousands of paid people everywhere across America. $1 billion spent, billion with a B. And people were saying, quote, nauseously optimistic about the chances of Kamala Harris getting elected. And you know what? Compared to her crazy opponent, they thought it was a no-brainer. Does that sound familiar? After the election, the best way of putting it is that Democrats were shell-shocked. This was indeed an obliterating blow to the party. They flushed through 2 candidates in 5 months, spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and still lost. That too to Donald Trump. But not just to Donald Trump, they also lost control of the U.S. Senate and the House. Brutal, brutal stuff. But in retrospect, I'm wondering if this was predictable. This election follows a wave of anti-incumbent sentiment in countries across the globe. The UK's Conservative Party saw their worst defeat in its history following the cost of living crisis, and also their really awkward handling of the cost of living crisis and flushing through 3 prime ministers themselves. Emmanuel Macron's centrist party came in 3rd place this July after a snap election was called there, and Marine Le Pen's National Rally right-wing party, they managed to succeed and do better than Macron. Macron's the president right now. In India, the incumbent BJP party lost its working majority. In Japan, the Liberal Democrats lost their majority. Their prime minister hasn't even been on the job a full 2 months, I should point out. It's a trend everywhere. Incumbents are doing terrible, and they are losing. And I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. Canada's got an election next year, and it's not looking too hot for Justin Trudeau. But anyway, Kamala Harris may have not been the sitting president of the United States, but she was the vice president. And unfortunately for her, the way this electorate operates, she had to own up to and defend Biden's policies as if she were an incumbent. But I guess building off of that, Harris was also a nominee for just 3 months. I mean, yes, it's not like we haven't had presidential nominees only be the official nominee for 3 or 4 months. Usually when it's that short, it's after a very competitive primary. But Harris didn't even have that. She literally was thrust into this race after President Biden dropped out in July. If you even watch the interviews of her, she really didn't, she wasn't, set or prepared for this type of responsibility. She woke up that morning, had, made bacon and pancakes for her grandnieces, and then got a call that afternoon from Joe Biden saying that he was dropping out. She had to then build an entire operation from the ground up in 3 months. Most presidential candidates will have been running for over a year before they become their party's nominee. I mean, Trump announced his candidacy in November of 2022, the week after the midterms. Harris was going to have to climb a mountain. And that's not to say she did anything wrong. In fact, I think Harris ran a great presidential campaign, especially given the situation she was in. Not even the most talented politician could pull off such a large feat without significant effort. I will give her credit. Harris was able to raise $1 billion on her own in 3 months. She led in many polls, and in general, she was seen as an actual challenger. This wasn't her fault. When Biden left the ticket, Democrats were in an even darker state than they are this week. At that point, when Biden dropped out, there was no predicting how bad they were going to lose. It was going to be brutal. Harris managed to reverse course and build back. So, while it was a pretty devastating blow for Democrats, I will say that it could have been much worse. And so they should be happy that it's not as bad as it could have been. But here is a clip, a few clips, I guess, of Harris's concession speech that she delivered the following day.
My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up and as long as we keep fighting. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition. and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
So then that was the Harris concession speech. And so that was what all that she could address. Then the final thing that I hear a lot right now, which I didn't hear earlier especially, is that as a party, Democrats failed to tap into the real electorate and its real concerns, which it's a valid criticism. It's just I'm curious about where this criticism was earlier in the campaign. It was not as mainstream as it has suddenly become, and so I'm curious about where that is. The main charge that I'm hearing right now is that Democrats were seemingly telling voters how to think about issues, particularly when it came to matters of the economy. It was, as some people are saying, arrogant. Democrats were telling people that they ought to feel the way that Democrats felt they should feel, the party. And people didn't like that. It's why among a few notable groups, there were losses. Latino men are the biggest example of the shocker from election night. A lot of Democrats took for granted the Latino vote, but with Latino men, Democrats lost a lot. Among Gen Z, this demographic of the audience of this show, you are listening to this, there is a good chance you are Gen Z based on the numbers that I get anyway. Gen Z men, not exactly the most likely people to vote for Harris, I guess, was what we're learning. As many of them, it was their first time voting in a presidential election. We are learning that it wasn't necessarily something written in the stars for Gen Z to be full-on, climate warrior Democrats. Like, Gen Z men did not vote for Harris in the commanding numbers that she anticipated. So there were a few shockers from the night that I would say, and it came mainly from this idea that voters felt like they were being told what to think. Democrats are being charged with not listening to voters about what matters. This talk of democracy and foreign policy and national security and things like that, people through and through, I guess they just don't care. There was a CNN analyst who put it very plainly. It is a luxury to be concerned about foreign policy or national security. And so when Harris would bring up people, like Liz Cheney and John Kelly to talk about how democracy was under threat, it was really not something that people were necessarily caring about. They weren't driven to the polls because they were facing economic hardship. Inflation was becoming a huge burden. Where that inflation might have come from, we will delve into that one day, I'm sure, on this show. But again, people's wallets were hurting. And for economic hardship, it was too much. The results coming in from the exit polls were also showing that people were directing their anger to the ballot box. 75% of voters said they couldn't say they were better off than they were 4 years ago. 45% they said they faced some sort of economic hardship in the last 4 years. 81% of Republican voters said that the economy was not serving them well. And that was a problem for Harris and Democrats more broadly. This election, as the results show, was a rejection of Democrat rule, at least a rejection of the Biden presidency and the trifecta control of Congress that Democrats had. Since the election, there has been a very open conversation in the party about what went wrong. Democrats are labeling it as soul-searching as they try to find their way out of their problems. It's become a bit more of a public spat because there are questions beginning to emerge about what direction the party should take. You had, the conventional thinking that many pundits are saying, and I kind of agree with this notion, that Democrats are going to move to the right now. They are going to move to the right to cater to more moderate voters, to cater to the working class voters they lost in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And we're seeing that with some positions even. People are starting to emerge. I'm not sure why the culture wars are suddenly dragged into this, but there's this example of trans rights and the recent comments from Representative Seth Moulton questioning some of that. But then there's also an equally loud left wing that is claiming that Democrats pivoted too far to the right to gain the support of Republicans, disaffected Republicans like Liz Cheney and other people that did not want to back Trump, when Democrats should have really been focusing on their own tent first. Progressives claim that Democrats also need to embrace populism the way Trump has to in order to combat MAGA. I don't quite know what that route holds going forward, and I don't know what things look like for Democrats going in, but whatever it is, it was definitely a triggering, traumatizing experience for Democrats who were not prepared to lose to Donald Trump again. And I think much of the next 2 to 4 years of this show is going to be examining and observing how Democrats try to redefine themselves after this blowout of an election. I think another thing to look at is who will become the next generation of leaders in this party. Biden's days, I will say it, they're over. I don't think Biden really has a place in leadership in the Democratic Party anymore, especially after just everything. But I think Harris can legitimately draw a spot for herself in the future of the party, at least for the next few years. However, the party may try to distance themselves from her and Biden, but also from Obama and from the Clintons. I think the problem with the Democratic Party that people might begin to notice, and this is just my own personal observation, it's that there are a lot of, thought leaders are people that the thought leaders in the Democratic Party are people who no longer run in elections. Hillary Clinton advising and talking about where the Democrats should go on policy. She hasn't run since 2016, and she lost. It's things like that where I think maybe people who are directing the conversation don't have their finger particularly on the pulse like they once did. Who knows? So we'll be sure to keep an eye on that here at the Sean S. Show. Stay tuned for a few episodes and pieces focusing on the future of the parties going into 2028, because I plan on making a few of those types of analysis pieces, so stay tuned for that. After the 2024 election, one thing is crystal clear. American politics is on a course for change. The next 4 years of the Trump presidency is going to be politicians everywhere in both parties jockeying for spots as leaders and rising stars in their parties and setting themselves up for 2028 and beyond. This is a transitionary period since Trump will now officially hand the baton over to someone else in 4 years, and Democrats will be working on finding a new leader and redefining themselves after historic defeats. We'll still be here at the Sean S. Show to cover it all, so stick around. Follow us on social media, check out the SeanSShow.com, subscribe to the Political News blog, and as always, follow us on Spotify and subscribe to the Sean S. Show's channel if you're listening to this on YouTube. Until next time, take a little time to enjoy the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics. We'll see you next time.